Like, which is the huge problem. It's just if you don't know your own story, then someone gives you the list of the perfect 7 things to say.
Yeah.
You like, I call this reading the stage directions out loud. Then we just read those 7. They read those things exactly, as opposed to what you take from that is these are the broad things people want. Here's how I'm going to explain how I am the one person who can do that, deliver those things.
Yeah.
But we're not. We're like all trees, no forest these days, and it's a huge problem.
Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I'm joined by
Jenifer Fernandez-Ancona, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Way to Win.
Also today, we have a very special guest, as promised last week, Dan Pfeiffer, who likely needs no introduction to our listeners, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's the co-host of Pod Save America. He's the author of he authors an excellent Substack called The Message Box, which frankly is one of the very few things in my inbox I consider a must read. He's written 2 books on Trumping America. And yes, we still can. And in a world long, long ago, before any of that and any of this that we're in now, he served as a senior advisor to President Barack Obama, which is where I occasionally cross paths with him as I cover the White House. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
All right. So we invited Dan on to help us glean some insights from this important group of Biden skippers who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but stayed home in 2024 to figure out what Democrats should be doing to win them back. In fact, Dan, we were pretty captivated by a short hit of righteous rage you delivered on Pod Save America last week about Democrats learning the wrong lessons from 2024 amid a conversation about the illegal abduction of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And you said, quote, "The idea that Democrats lose every time we talk about immigration is such a learned helplessness. It drives me bananas. I think Democrats are learning the wrong lessons from 2024. So, Dan, I just want to say we agree. And it made us want to ask you, in 3 words or less, what lessons should Democrats be learning, particularly in this moment of crisis as we look towards the midterms in 2028?
I'm just kidding about the 3 words.
Oh, I can do 3 words if you want.
Yeah, do it.
My 3 words would be on offense.
Love that.
And I think to the argument I made in that rant, I guess you would call it, was that sort of the convention was coming out in 2024 is Trump won on border security. We got crushed on border security. Biden and then eventually Harris were down, 20 points in who you trusted more on border security. And the mistake Democrats made, in my view, is we limited the issue of immigration to just border security. Who could be toughest on the border? Who could keep people from coming across the border? Who did the best job keeping people from crossing the border? Who would deal with the chaos from the border? And we didn't have a broader discussion about immigration reform. Who could actually solve the immigration problem in this country? We did make an argument about the consequences that we are feeling right now of Trump's mass deportation plans. And I'm worried that we are making that mistake. At least the parts of the party who are arguing we should not engage on Trump's illegal deportations have learned the wrong lesson from 2024.
Right. And I remember you specifically saying that we let Trump define the terms of the debate. And that's something that we talk about a lot, inside Way to Win. So,
and we're still wrestling with it, right? I think that's why it's so relevant. And it's not just immigration, it's other issues as well that we see. Just we can go on offense, we can make the case for our ideas. And I think we'll hear in some of the skipper focus groups, like the desire for more of that. So
absolutely. But he did it in 3 words. Be on offense as instructed, which frankly I didn't expect, but there you go.
Amazing.
So this is the second of 3 episodes we're putting out on these Biden skipper focus groups from battleground states. They're all from battleground states, all of which included groups with whom Kamala Harris underperformed, under 35 voters, Latinas, Latinos, and Black men. And last week, we released some of the initial findings from these focus groups in a Rolling Stone article, along with the podcast episode we dropped. And the response online has been interesting. So before we get into more sound from these groups, Jenifer, can you just share some of what the reaction has been?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of overwhelming and consistent in the fact that there was so much disdain for the voters themselves. Like, that was the reaction. The summary point that I pulled up was like, congratulations, dipshits, you ruined the country. You know, that was kind of the vibe. And there wasn't a lot of curiosity. And, you know, I get it. Like, I think we all understand that kind of sentiment, but it's like, these are battleground state voters. They voted for us at least once, and we see it as that they're part of our coalition, and that they're persuadable, they're gettable, and that we should bring more curiosity to it because there's also a lot of them. You know, the voter file is showing, as it's starting to come out, a lot of Democrats who voted in 2020 didn't show up in 2024, and it was significant enough to have affected the election outcome. In addition to the people who switch sides, right? It's a both and. And so I just wanted to ask you, Dan, too, what do you think about this? Is shaming these voters a great way to win them back? Or,
It is.
You know,
it is not. Shaming voters and screaming at voters is never been a particularly good persuasion technique.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen this a lot. It's not just in the reaction to your focus groups.
Right.
I mean, people would resist. Like, you know, we saw this when my podcast co-host John Favreau did his wilderness series where he does focus groups. You listen to him. People get very mad, like political junkies, right? The kind who would engage in, you know, this podcast or Pod Save America, whatever else, can get very mad at voters because they may not have all the information because they're not engaged in politics. They have other concerns. And then there's been this also, and this drives me insane, since the election, like with the tariffs in particular, with the federal workers being fired, with some of the people from communities being deported, and there's like this fuck around and find out like theme you hear from people with like to all these voters, which is just, it's like you're never going to win people back by screaming at them and shaming at them. And you're exactly right, try to learn from them, because someone who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 is someone who we should always be in our persuasion universe. We can always get, and we should figure out why we lost them and how we get them back. And even if we find out that if we study them, but also scream at them, they're not going to be open to whatever we discover in our analysis of why they made the decision they made. And I would just on non-voters, Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter said something to me 7 years ago now, 6 years, sometime a while during the 2018 elections, where she said, not voting is a choice, and it's a considered choice. And we should try to analyze it with the same amount of curiosity and scrutiny that we bring to why people voted for Trump or voted for Harris or voted for Biden or whatever else. Is the decision not to vote is a choice too. And so we should try to understand that too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's how we see it too. Turnout isn't just turnout. Like, turnout requires persuasion. And there is an art of persuasion that we've seen be applied to lots of kind of voters. And we're kind of saying it should be applied to these voters too. And it really
100%.
hasn't been, like, for a while. So that's helpful. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's a great segue into getting to some of the sound from these Biden skippers. And as we listen, let's think about the question we posed at the top. What lessons should we be learning from them? And the main reason is because if, you know, we want to make better decisions as a Democratic family, as we were just talking about. And if we here's what learning the wrong lessons can look like. Ending up inviting a right-wing extremist like Charlie Kirk on our podcast to mend fences with him, or scolding people like Senator Chris Van Hollen, who went down to El Salvador to stand on the side of due process, the Constitution, a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, and the ideal of basic human dignity. So with that, I mean, that's not where we want to be in any way, shape, or form. It's not going to win us any votes to be either of those two things. So with that, let's delve into some of the strong signals we picked up listening to these groups. And we'll start with issues related to the campaign and something that frankly surprised us: the fallout from the lack of a primary and the late candidate switch from Biden to Harris. Let's listen.
Biggest reason why you did not vote for Kamala Harris quickly.
Well, real quick, I just want to provide context leading into that. She was not nominated. She was just placed by the Democratic Party 2 months before it was time to vote.
Okay.
So she didn't even get the proper runway to be able to put up, to be able to campaign as we've seen other candidates be able to campaign. And that just speaks to how really Black women are treated in this country. It's like, hey, fix this problem, do your best of luck. You need Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, we got you, best of luck. And that's not a serious way to approach a presidential campaign. And when you're not taken seriously by the 13% of people that is supposed to support you, you're not going to be taken serious by the other 87% of people that don't really care about you or care about anybody that's on stage or anyone of that. Yeah, you're not going to get that vote. So, and then I just want to also mention, going back to your last point real quick, where you said, what was the problem in 2020? The problem was that the people who were dying looks like everyone on this call. And when that happens, we all subconsciously feel the need to change. Even if we can't directly help it or they're not family members to us, we all feel the need to change. And we all know or believe or we're taught that change starts at the top. So when people that look like you are dying every single week, every single month, something has to change. And that's
So I'm hearing it was in 2020, it was life or death.
That's how it felt,
We were
especially
literally-
with COVID. Either COVID was going to get you or the police were going to get you. That's how it felt.
Who agrees with on that one? That 2020 was really a life or death election for many of us around this table. 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, 5 of us. Okay, 6 of us. Okay,
All are for real.
okay. The main reason why you did not vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 quickly.
Yeah, I just didn't think that she was after that Megan Thee Stallion thing. I just think she wasn't going to be taken serious. So it was just like, and then didn't know too much about her either. And then the locking up the black men and all that stuff. I heard all that too. So
how come there wasn't a hype train for Kamala Harris? Why wasn't there like a get on board, vote for Kamala Harris? Why did that happen?
I think it was.
Oh, there was a hype train.
It seemed like it was to me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So there is there was a hype train.
Yeah.
Okay, so how come the hype train happened in 2020 but didn't happen for Kamala Harris?
But I'll tell you, I have a theory on that. The hype train happened because there was no other option. So it's not really a hype train if you're only given one option.
Okay.
And that I think that people confuse her momentum with availability, and that's sometimes easily to get misconstrued.
Okay.
And that's the difference. If we had other options, that momentum that she garnered, especially when it's sort of like well, that's not even we'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's just we just can't confuse momentum with availability. And if you're only given one candidate, then it's going to seem like everyone is supporting that candidate and everyone's getting behind her because there was no other available options.
All right.
Say in response to that, this is why I think that the primary is so important. If we're going to only have 2 parties, I need to be able to select my own personal type of Democrat that has differing within the Democratic Party, the differing sections. And it's just like the only version of that we have where we get to pick. And it felt like in the 2024 election, we just got handed something that was forced upon us a little bit.
Thrown in at the last second, and her campaign really couldn't have been more about, I mean, they could have put together a better campaign about the subject at hand and topics and their policy changes and things like that. But I think it was at such a last minute that they had to more like, and for the lack of a better word, mudsling to show why Trump was bad and prove why Trump is bad. And basically just kind of go against that rather than just say, hey, these are our policies and this is why it's good.
All right. Well, it's always fun listening to voters. But part of what comes up for me, I want to hear your thoughts, Dan. But we were part of the crew of Democrats who knew that something had to happen after Biden's debate performance. You know, we had to have the switch. And at the time, you know, made sense. It still makes sense. Like, it was the right choice. But I didn't, until listening to these voters, I didn't quite process just like how undemocratic it felt to a group of voters that's already kind of on the edge of feeling a little bit disenfranchised in general, right? And so that kind of sticks out to me. And, you know, at the time I was also arguing we should have some kind of process, some kind of mini primary, and perhaps in hindsight that should have happened, right? But, and to be clear, these voters didn't want Biden to stay in. So that wasn't the issue, right? But there's something about just like reckoning with that lesson of Biden not choosing to step out earlier. Also, like the administration not helping Kamala be successful when she was vice president, right? We saw people didn't know who she was when she entered the race, despite having been vice president for 4 years. So those are some of my thoughts. Like, how do we learn lessons from this? But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is a lesson we never have to deal with again, which is having to do a candidate switch with 100 days to go. Like, that seems like a black swan event. I mean, like, this was the risk. I mean, I don't think it was the risk, because like my assessment always from the moment that Biden walked out the debate stage was we had to make a switch because we were going to go from a 2% chance of winning to maybe a 45% chance of winning with Kamala Harris, right? The Trump would still be a favorite, but she'd have basically had no shot to a shot. And I agreed with you at the time. I thought if it was possible to do a process of some kind running into the convention, that would have been great. My expectation was Kamala Harris would have won that process in almost any scenario. But because Biden took this extra 3 weeks, there really wasn't, like, in hindsight, there was not time for that, because she was already at a deficit, you know, at the 106-day mark when she got to take over. She was already needed more time than was available to actually get people to know who she was. So this is a product of that extraordinary choice. I guess to the extent we're thinking about lessons going forward, it is the need for a robust primary in 2028. And that is hopefully that calendar is done in a way that there's always a balance. You don't want it to extend forever, but you want it to be long enough that people actually get a chance to take the measure of the candidates and feel like they had some investment in it. Like, if it wraps up in 2020 after 4 states, then I think people may not feel they got a chance to vote. So, you know, like, there probably maybe some lessons about changing the primary calendar in there. But the bigger lesson about don't run a candidate 106 days before the election is one we hopefully never confront again.
Right. But like, there is also, I think, a question of this like generational changes in leadership and how people like can let go, right? And then bring up new leaders with them. Like, I'm seeing Bernie do that with AOC at these rallies. Like, he's the fight the oligarchy guy. He's bringing her, giving her the platform. You know, I think that's just a generally important lesson right now when we have all these kind of aging leaders in our party.
Yeah. We should be highlighting new faces now, so it's not radical change when they take over. I agree with that.
Yeah. I will add that when you listen to these focus groups in totality, what comes through over and over again, and this is one piece of it that we just talked about, is how powerless people feel, how out of control they sort of feel like their lives are, and how little control they feel like they have over it. And this just fed into that, was one piece of it. So that's something to remember going forward. Okay. Let's pick up and go towards, there was a sentiment that kind of came through a little bit there, but there was a more pronounced sentiment that the campaign wasn't really a serious effort. So let's listen to a couple clips about that.
There's a particular thing I wanted to hear. I think the sensationalism of what this election was just turned me off. I just felt it was more, cloaks and daggers, and even when they sit down to debate, it just doesn't feel serious. It doesn't feel like we're talking about an election for the United States of America. It feels like we're on a reality TV show, and that, to me, is just frustrating.
Just like the MAGA fanatics were just overpowering, every single one of Harris's new voters, even with like the new support and endorsement from like big names and celebrities like Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, even freaking Bad Bunny. Still wasn't enough to convince like the rest of the country, with all the people being like dumb as they are, voting for Trump.
The celebrity endorsements are really corny. I don't think it helps.
Yeah.
Dude, we have a celebrity as a president right now, man. Like, who had over 7 bankrupt companies.
Mm-hmm.
I feel bad, but I actually watched The Apprentice before, and I thought it was really entertaining. But I didn't get the sense from watching the show, like, yeah, that guy, he knows what's going on. It's not the sense.
Things
Yeah,
that
so
bothered me about Kamala, I felt like she was mainly targeting a certain age group. When she did what she did, and I hate to say this because I love R&B and I love rap and I love those things, but I felt like that was her focus. That was her focus group and her focus age range, where it just made her. It made her seem not enough to be the president of the United States in so many words.
What was the age group in your mind that she was targeting?
In my mind, I would say not 16, because 16-year-olds can't vote. So I would say 18 to maybe up to 30.
Okay.
And even saying 30 is kind of a stretch, but I feel like she was trying to target 2 separate groups. She was definitely focused on the woman empowerment and let's go woman. Yeah. Woman of color. And then she got the woman's vote, and then she was targeting the younger group by, doing these concerts, it felt like. And when you're dealing with the government, you're dealing with the older group of people, from what I was hearing, they weren't taking her serious. It wasn't looking good.
It sounds like you were not also taking her serious. Am I gathering?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I felt like her focus wasn't broad enough for me.
Okay.
Like she was just honing in on just those 2 things, where it should have been, the focus should have been more in depth and covering way more issues that the country was dealing with. And somebody else mentioned this, like giving us some pay raises and upping the minimum wage, because the price of milk had jumped from $3 to $7 or whatever it was, and helping us in that way. I mean, we for centuries and years, women always want to be empowered, and we've always fought that battle. So I didn't feel like it was something that she needed to pay so much attention to. Like there was other issues she could have, spread her wings a little bit and touched different age groups and different class of people, to say the least, different people with different statuses. I think that would have gave her more range.
Okay, so it's eye-opening to hear how the celebrity endorsements sort of landed with these voters with a thud. When in the past, for a candidate like Barack Obama, who quite well, the celebrity buzz was never a hindrance. And so, Dan, do you have any takeaways about what this might mean for future campaigns?
Yeah, I don't want to read too much into this, but I'd say a couple things. One, this is a very interesting view into truly understanding what people were actually hearing, not what Kamala Harris was saying. Right? Like what they were getting, to the extent they're hearing anything about her, was, I guess, the celebrity endorsement stuff, Taylor Swift, the coconut memes, just Megan, like all they were hearing from her events was the celebrities who were there. Right. So I think that's just as a general rule in politics, we focus a lot on what the candidates say and not enough on what the voters hear. And that gap between those 2 things is like gargantuan right now. And it's evidenced in that clip.
Yeah.
The Obama endorsement thing is celebrity endorsement thing. It's a very different period of time. People were less cynical about everything. Someone like Oprah really had like huge sway back then. And so her endorsing was like a big deal, kind of probably in a similar way in which Joe Rogan's endorsement mattered in this race.
Right.
I also think as a party, this really started in 2016. Like Obama, like I hate to say this way, but he was the celebrity, right? Like other than Oprah, he was the cool one. He was what people came to see. Yes, we would have musical guests at things, which could build a crowd, but they were like, people were there to see Obama and hear Bruce Springsteen play. But then once we got to 2016, it never really happened in 2020 because of the pandemic. we had less exciting candidates to swaths of voters, and so we were building crowds entirely on celebrities. And we got it. We were inviting the same celebrities to all the events. Like Alyssa Mastromonaco, my Crooked Media and former White House colleague, has pointed out that Kamala Harris and John Kerry both had the same lineup at their last night of the election rally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's like maybe we could also get some cooler celebrities.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's unfair to say Kamala Harris is targeting the younger voters because none of her celebrities were. I don't know how old that person was, but her celebrities were really people from my generation. Like, I mean, it's the same people. We just have we have the same Rolodex of celebrities in the Democratic Party that we keep going back to, and then we hope and pray that Taylor Swift will do a concert for us, and then everything else is the same. Bruce Springsteen, James Taylor, just Pitbull. Like it is really the Obama era, and we probably have to update that list.
Yeah. Well, and there's something about also the like, again, if you get into the mindset of these voters, like they're struggling, like the prices, we haven't had a pay raise. So then the celebrity factor, it just cuts against that narrative wise, right? That's also part of it.
Yeah, I think so. And there's a lot of racial and gender tropes in this too, which is a Black woman candidate starts at a deficit of seriousness with a large swath of voters, including this group of voters here. And so Obama dealt with this too. Like, this was a challenge, but I think it's an even bigger challenge for a woman of color. Yeah. And so, like, none of them are carrying that Donald Trump has celebrities at his events, but they are, I would say, a different like cut of celebrity, right? They are country music stars. They're MMA fighters. It's not Hollywood people per se. And that may mean a little bit of something different to different groups of people.
Right. It's a celebrity that's or like a figure that's plugging more into the zeitgeist of now rather than the zeitgeist of the past. Yeah, I think that's fair.
I also think it worked against her that she didn't have a proper primary. I mean, for Barack Obama, it was like, this was just, he had a whole, a whole vision that he was selling and everything. And the celebrities were just sort of the icing on the cake. Yeah. They weren't necessarily supposed to be the cake,
Yeah,
so,
that's right. That's exactly right.
True.
It's well put.
Yeah.
But okay, let's move on to what we've been thinking of as movement vectors. And we're going to listen to some participants on Gaza, which has, as much as strategists wanted to sort of wish away, was a real sticking point for voters under 35, or at least, a sizable number of them.
Yeah.
Anyone have like concerns over her experience or her leadership or her issues, her ideology, her ties to Biden? Did anyone have an issue with that?
No, she talked a good game. She played politics well.
Okay.
Like, kinda. So I have a couple of friends on campus who are Palestinian.
Okay.
And how she kept really quiet on it was just like going, we're seeing this happen in real time.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone else have an issue that she was quiet on the issue of Gaza,
big
Palestine?
time.
That bothered people?
Big time. That's another reason why it's like lesser of two evils. We always want to stick our big American nose in other countries where it doesn't belong, but we don't want to speak up against actual injustices or actual problems that are happening when our allies decide to, commit genocide.
Mm-hmm. What about you?
I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna say I would look past it, but I wouldn't, put it aside. There's like lesser of two evils. If I would have, to choose and pick between, the two, it would still have to be anyone. Again, I would vote for Roomba rather than Trump.
Literally, with googly eyes on it.
Yeah.
Like, there was a stance made where we're going to be pro-Israel, and I don't know why that decision was made, and it feels like no one ever talked about it, and I feel like we never got any sort of clear take on it, and I didn't appreciate that.
So was there a position to conservative on this issue for you then?
Yeah.
What about you?
Yes. or at least not explained enough to explain why they're doing the thing that doesn't make sense initially. There should be a reason why. I don't feel like it was really communicated well.
So just a note among these, this focus group, among the under 35s, 5 of the 8 participants thought Harris's failure to really engage on Gaza was a problem. 1 wasn't familiar with the issue at all. So Jen, what was your takeaway from this about how grassroots movements can work for or against a campaign?
Yeah. I mean, part of what I was thinking was there's that clip earlier where you started to hear someone talk about 2020 was a life or death election. And that was like the rise of the movement for Black lives in the wake of George Floyd. And we also saw it in 2022 with Dobbs, right? And the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the way that the movement then carried forward. But people talked about it in these groups. They talked about 2020 as like, I was subconsciously persuaded, like everyone around me was doing this thing. We all knew we had to get rid of Trump. We were all part of this movement. You know, we saw our people being hurt and we were in the streets and then we went to vote. It was connected how the movement was going in sort of concert with where the party was going, right? And that's just one of the lessons from this last election is that the movement vectors weren't aligned with the party. A lot of people, young people, were getting engaged in this movement for Palestinian rights and freedom. It was actually at cross purposes with the position of the party at the presidential level. And so that's just, I think, something we need to think about going forward. Like how maybe you can't, make that happen for yourself, but like when you can tap into a naturally organic sort of movement vector, you're going to be more likely to pull this kind of voter into the coalition. That's at least one thing I think about. But what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, this is a sort of a hard one to. This is one where common sense works better than data, because you look at all the polling about what young people care about. Gaza is way down the list compared to the economy, healthcare, climate change, those sorts of things.
For sure.
That putting aside, obviously, the very unique situation in Michigan, like there was always going to be a bigger problem there. But what I think that sort of quantitative research misses, and you do pick up in the sort of qualitative research, is like what the Biden-Harris administration's position on Gaza said to young people about that candidate, right? It's just you're oppositional to a thing a lot of young people care about. It like poisoned the well for them culturally, for the ability to make any sort of cultural connection with young voters. And I remember talking to John Della Volpe before when Biden was still the candidate, John Della Volpe, the youth pollster from who works at Harvard. And John said to me that young voters are often more embarrassed now to mention that they support Biden than young people saying that they support Trump 4 and 6 years ago. And it's just the culture has shifted that much that it was so uncool. I think it was probably never cool to do it, but it was certainly since October 7th, like it could make you a pariah in a conversation and like people would kind of like mumble it, which is so different than how it used to be a Democrat, right? If Obama for sure, but also even Clinton and Kennedy and all these other times.
Yeah.
And just like Biden was not the first choice candidate of young voters, obviously. And then that got made so much worse. And then he did a lot of things that they liked, trying to do things on climate change and student loan debt. But then, his approach to Gaza, and which I think, and I'm very sympathetic to Kamala Harris in the situation. I don't really know what you do as the vice president when the president will not change his position and will not really even acknowledge the critique from people, right? It was very just blinders on, and that White House very much struggled to show any sympathy for the people of Gaza and people sympathizing with people of Gaza. And they put her in a tough position. I did, probably in hindsight, you could do more, like not having someone speak at the convention. There were a couple of things you could have done to build bridges.
Just to show I'm listening, right? Like I'm listening.
Like if you talk to people around her and you read the reporting, she had a very different position than President Biden on this, or at least someone that was closer to where the movement was than where the president was.
Yeah.
And I understand the challenge of trying to separate yourself from the president on a foreign policy issue. That is very hard to do. And I think may not be treated particularly well, especially coming from a woman of color. Like the way people treat that would be very differently than someone else. but they're like, you're exactly right that if all the enthusiasm in grassroots organizing among young people is in opposition to your position, you're going to be in trouble. And you got to try to, if you can at least try to do something to build bridges there.
Yeah, I like that way of thinking. I like that frame. I think that's helpful.
Agree. And I think that, I mean, Barack Obama benefited from a lot of things, a lot of good things going in his direction. But one of them was his vote against the Iraq War and how that helped him in both the primary and then in the general election too. So, okay, let's move on to issues within the campaign that just are sort of a category of misses by the campaign, where the issues either didn't land or they were just sort of MIA altogether. Let's listen to a few of these clips.
Just in my life, a big Trump supporting group of people that I feel like it's almost like I just felt like Trump was overbearingly ahead. You know what I mean? It's like everywhere I go, it's like Trump love. So it's almost like I just felt like I don't even really like Kamala. I don't think this is going to matter. I just felt kind of defeated, so I just didn't vote.
Okay. When did you decide not to vote, or were you always leaning that way?
So I actually went to one of Kamala's rallies, and at the end of it, I didn't feel like I could stand behind her.
Okay. How come? Like, what did she say at that rally that put a bad taste in your mouth?
I don't really think it's what she said, it's what she didn't say.
What was it that she didn't say that you were hoping to hear?
Well, I'll be honest, I did walk out early, so I wasn't there like the entire time. But I know she did speak about like the home tax credit or something like that. Something like that. And then like the child tax credit, something like that. And I don't know, I don't really care for either of those, since I'm a renter and I also don't have children. So I don't know.
Just like I brought it up earlier, but the Black community is only 13% of America, and we're still like 17% above the average American when it comes to being in poverty. And that's crazy. Like, just like thinking about the fact that for so many years and for so long, we've like definitely voiced our issues. There's been riots. There's been so many type of movements. Just like it's put in our face, I think, still to this day, like consistently, just how much of an unfair, justice we have still going on in the system when it comes to this, like blacks versus whites or anybody else. And I feel like that should be one of the main things that are actually focused on when it comes to being a president of an entire country, is to think that you could really like help. You could help our entire community, and you're not. And then like Biden gets in the office and gives like $57 billion to like one country for a war, Ukraine, to be specific. And then I think we got like 17 or like $16 billion as an entire Black community in the last 4 years. Like, that's insane. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. Our schools are BS. Our homes are BS. There's like people, like, I'm from Michigan. Like I go out to Detroit every weekend, and like I see homes of like that are just ran down, and these people are forced to live in them, or they're just trying to be bought out by people who are planning on gentrifying the entire community and pushing all the people out of them. And we see this shit because we have nobody helping us. And it's like, then you got a Black woman talking about getting in the office. And I'm going to be honest, like, I did try to pay the best attention I could, but she was not talking about helping us in those ways. I feel like she was just pandering.
So the young woman who attended a Harris rally but didn't hear anything that resonated for her keeps me up at night. I mean, one of my takeaways was that if you don't develop a vision and a strong narrative, and instead you're left with sort of a grab bag of issues, you're going to leave a slice of voters behind, even if they go to your rally, which I'm just like haunted by. But Dan, what stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, which is I mean, so let's stipulate that no candidate in general election has ever entered it with less knowledge about her, even though she was sitting vice president. People knew nothing about her, and she'd never a primary to build that out. So that is very clear.
Yep.
I do think the campaign struggled to come up with the story they wanted to tell. Right. They almost, in my mind, worked a little bit backwards from message to story instead of story to message.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with all these policies, and they had these policies, and they were I'm sure they were great policies, and they probably tested well in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to listen to not the full speech, but just like the thrust of everything that was breaking through about what Kamala Harris was saying or doing, it was hard to get like a clear narrative, right? Like the version, 2020 is this anomaly election, so it's hard to compare, but like Biden was basically stability and experience, right? Like in the midst of chaos, we're gonna have stability. Yeah. Obama was hope and change. Trump's make America great again. It's like, what was Kamala? It really, I just want to keep saying this, in an impossible position.
Yeah.
Like she's better than Trump, but different than Biden, but how different and in which ways? And so like absent that story, like policies like the child tax credit or the home tax credit they didn't add up to a bigger picture of who she was. Their goal was to make her seem like a fighter who cared about real people, but I don't think that came through enough to get these people. So they sort of default to the specific things on policies because they don't have a sense of who she is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then on the flip side, right, what the Trump and the Republicans did was such a strong story. Mm-hmm. And you kind of started to hear that a little bit in that last clip where it's like, well, they're spending so much on Ukraine, they're not spending on us. That was actually a lie. That we called it the big lie, right? That the Democrats don't care about you, they care about XYZ other group, whether it's trans people or Ukraine or immigrants, right? That story was so strong. And so it also pulled it all over. The lack of a strong story on the other side kind of led to that, right? So I just thought that was also something to bring up. Like, that is also the media environment and what people would hear from different YouTube stars and TikToks and such was that exact narrative. They're spending so much on Ukraine, they don't care about you.
And this is where the story thing comes in, which is in a fragmented media environment where you need lots of people to be telling a story. It has to be a clear enough story that everyone's saying the same thing. So everyone is saying the same thing about Kamala Harris and about Donald Trump from the people who are supporting Trump. Then on our side, you're not. One, we have a smaller megaphone, as we've talked about many times. Yes. But people are not. But with a smaller megaphone, you need to be
not
even
anymore.
More consistent. That's right.
Not anymore, Dan.
That's right. Now we've added this podcast and the list. Yes.
No.
But it just there was not like if you told people to go out and make the case for Kamala Harris, people could make a great case, but you get a different case every time.
Yeah.
If you made the case for Donald Trump, you got the same case.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a really important lesson. And it's just an important lesson because when you rely on this kind of testing, it's important to like test messages and see what lands, et cetera. But you could miss the forest for the trees if you're only relying on which policies test better up against other policies, right? How do you actually get to the story?
This is like one of my huge lessons of like, I'm a data nerd. I consume all of it. I take it all very seriously. I think people who do it very smart, but I do think, and this is a couple campaigns in a row where the candidate probably couldn't do the best job of giving the Ted Kennedy answer of why they're running. Mm-hmm. And when you can't do that, then you substitute the story for a bunch of specific message tested things that don't really sound like how people talk.
Yeah.
Like, which is the huge problem. It's just if you don't know your own story, then someone gives you the list of the perfect 7 things to say.
Yeah.
You like, I call this reading the stage directions out loud. Then we just read those 7. They read those things exactly, as opposed to what you take from that is these are the broad things people want. Here's how I'm going to explain how I am the one person who can deliver those things.
Yeah.
But we're not. We're like all trees, no forest these days, and it's a huge problem. And that is a candidate problem that comes from you cannot. I've worked with a lot of politicians, and you cannot teach a politician this. They have to sort of come to it naturally or come to it instinctively. Mm-hmm. Or you develop it over the course of a primary, right? Obama, like he was obviously a very gifted messenger, but he got much better over the course of that primary. And maybe if Harris had or whoever had a year to try to road test all of this stuff and get feedback from the audience as you're doing it, you can tell that story in a better way. Doing it from a standing start with 106 days to go is
hard.
impossible.
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to say one more thing, and then I know we want to move on, Kerry, but there's also something about who your audience is, right? And knowing that you have a big coalition that you want to mobilize and bring together. That includes people who might vote for Trump, but includes all these people who might stay home versus vote. And I actually feel like when Kamala first came out of the gate, she started to have kind of a strong story. You know, there was a lot about freedom. There was about a better life for you and your family. And then it all just changed. You know, something happened in the leadership decisions that started to veer into a different direction. And I think it's because the audience they started to feel like was so important to, you know, that they had to focus on. But it's just part of the lesson of going forward of like narrowing that, narrowing that at that moment was maybe not the best way to get all of these people who were, you know, could have been part of the coalition to come in.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So, okay, enough with the doom and gloom.
It wasn't doom and gloom. It was very productive.
It's constructive. Yes. It's productive. That's why we're here, right? We're trying to learn something. But we did want to end on glimmers of hope for 2026 and maybe even 2028. Because a good number of these voters, we believe after listening to 4 focus groups and working on some polling about them and looking at Catalyst data, are actually reachable. So let's listen to that.
You're not going to be able to do everything all at once. So it's not going to be a quick fix. We can't keep putting Band-Aids over gunshot wounds. We have to actually see the root of the problem, and we have to take it one step at a time and actually make the changes that need to happen. It's not going to happen. Just like how the Republicans got here. They didn't get here overnight. They didn't get control over Congress, the presidency, and over the judicial branch. It was one step at a time. And we all know on the judicial side of it, they're forever. Like, they only can retire. They can't be replaced, voted out. They can only retire.
Or
so
die.
We have to take our time. Or die. Yeah, that's the only 2 options. And, unless that happens, there's no change there. So we have to control our controllables, take it one step at a time, and rebuild it to whatever we want it to be, one step at a time, one serious candidate at a time.
Yes, too. Looking back now, does anyone here wish they had voted?
I do. I think that when I was in my headspace where I felt that my vote wasn't really going to make a difference, I wasn't 100% buying in with Kamala because she came in late. I thought, I'm just going to bow out. But today, I wish that I would have done something, because sometimes doing nothing makes you part of the problem.
Podcasts that you listen to get information? No,
but it would be cool to be able to have a podcast to listen to know where to go to.
Okay.
It would be cool to have a podcast, Dan.
This is the future. The future. This is the answer. More podcasts.
No offense, Dan. We weren't trolling you with that last one.
Yes, I'm not. I feel trolled, but I'm not offended.
So, Dan, putting your best campaign operative hat on, what do you see as potential opportunities to get these voters back in the midterms?
And can I just say one thing, because we didn't say this, Dan, but when we asked people like, do you think you could vote in 26 that could be a protest vote? And it was like very like unanimous in many of the groups. Like a lot of people were putting energy toward that idea. So just wanted to give you that too. Go for it.
So I think that I have a fair amount of optimism for 2026 and some optimism for 2028. And let me explain why those are different. One of them is just turnout, right? Like what we need to win in 2026, given that it's a midterm and a lot of the voters we lost are presidential year only voters. We should do better in 2026. And it's just, we have 2 things going for us. One is Trump this doesn't come through in these groups, but a lot of other groups I've heard. Voters are not dumb, right? They knew what they were getting with Trump. They don't really like him that much. They have real concerns about his conduct. They think he's probably pretty corrupt. They don't love like what he says or tweets or truths or whatever else. But they did believe that he would be better on the economy. He would strengthen the economy and lower the costs. And he is currently under a pretty aggressive effort to weaken the economy and raise their costs. And that's the sort of thing that ruins presidencies, and where you lose those voters. We can get voters back over that. The second thing is that you see this in a lot of research now, that people are pretty concerned about his sort of abuse of power, that he's doing things that even though he told them he would do them, they didn't really believe him at the time, but now he's doing them. And just the idea that we can be if Democrats can make themselves seem like that we are strong enough and worthy enough to be a check on Trump, he would be looking for a check. So that's in our favor for 2026. 2028, we have to do something very important to succeed, is that we have to become change. We have to break out of our habit that we've developed over the last many years here of just being the defenders of the broken institutions. And we're kind of falling back into it sometimes here too, where it's like any cut is a bad cut. Any change in how the federal government works is a bad change, when there's something between keeping the house exactly as it is and burning it down, when we can find ourselves somewhere in the middle there. But I think in 2028, we can bring a lot of these voters back and voters like them if we can represent change and reform to a system that they did not trust before Trump came back in office. And I think they're going to feel much worse about, given how he's governed over the first 90 some days here.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And we did cover that last time a little bit on the Trump backlash. We heard a ton of Trump backlash from these voters. They're really upset about the cuts. They're really upset about immigration, the abductions and the deportations. It's not landing well. I mean, these people already kind of hated Trump. And I think even with his own voters, right, they're getting that kind of remorse. So that's really real. I think the other thing is the debates that we've been I think everything you said is exactly right. But the debates we've been having kind of in the elites sort of discourse is she was too woke. The groups, they're too far left. It's this sort of left to moderate scale. But we just feel, especially after listening to all these people, that that's just the wrong scale.
I could not agree more.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, are you fighting for me, or are you kind of capitulating? That's one scale. And I think part of the change that you're saying, it's has to be about upending this economic system that people feel so beat down by. It has to look really different. That's why I think the Fight the Oligarchy tour is interesting and inspiring. They're actually saying all these things, and they've got record crowds coming in and off year. So that's energy that I feel like that's what I think is kind of sort of encouraging. That's energy that we can tap into if we, have the right candidates in the campaigns who can step into that.
Yeah, it's that people want us to. We have a big deficit of trust to come out of over the last 4 years.
Yeah,
a lot of it feels very unfair for all the many things that the Biden-Harris administration did, but that's just sort of where we are. Our party's at its lowest standing in my lifetime, and we have to build back trust with our own voters and the country writ large. And we have to. The best way to do that is to seem like we're fighting. And when I think about the scale, I think it is you're exactly right between between AOC and Bernie and Chris Murphy up here and Chuck Schumer down here is sort of one way to think about the scale, or at least in fairness to Chuck Schumer, that one vote Chuck Schumer took.
Yes, absolutely.
To be fair to him. But the other sort of way I think about it is the scale of American politics is not left, right, it's insider, outsider. And we have fully embraced insider. And what the only upside to having control of literally nothing is that we can't be the status quo. We can only be change. So we should really try to embrace that as a message and identity. And I think there are a lot of, these are imperfect parallels, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned by the Democratic road back after Bush won re-election in 2004.
Yeah.
And one of the ways in which that came about was we became the party of reform. Now, the Republicans gifted us a massive amount of corruption. That's what Obama ran on, right? We can, I mean, this is very on brand for me to say, but we could get back to some of that 2007, 2008 Obama outsider rhetoric. And it can be as simple as going back to even where we were not that long ago, which is where candidates did not take corporate PAC and lobbyist money.
Right.
It's a really simple thing that means you will make more money you will raise more money as a candidate by having that stance than you would ever get from corporate PACs and lobbyists as a Democrat.
So yeah, because who are you standing with? It says something.
Yeah, just finding ways to demonstrate that, because we this is going to be the most corrupt administration in history. It's going to be there for the world to see.
Yeah.
Half, whatever is a dozen billionaires in the administration, Elon Musk running rampant, giving himself contracts, all of this. And like, we could be the party that wants to fix this. But we would need to actually like embrace some positions that should not be controversial, but we've been able to do so. Like, I don't know, banning stock trading for members of Congress is one small example. Yeah.
It's a great one. It's a great one.
That's really a lot. It's a big ask.
Narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, for now, we're going to have to leave it there. We'll settle on the fact that 2028 is still sort of, we're still working on that, but for 2026, we're outsiders by default.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
We can sort of live on that for now and buy ourselves a little time to think bigger. Leaving you a couple nuggets from Dan Pfeiffer: be on offense and all trees, no forest. I want to thank you, Dan, for coming to Dan Pfeiffer for coming to join us and lend us your insights. Of course, you can catch Dan on Pod Save America, but I do recommend signing up for his Substack, the Message Box. Thank you, as always, to our listeners. We appreciate you and your dedication to the work of rebuilding our democracy, which at its core is about building coalitions and common cause across groups with different biographies and lived experiences. And as we have been saying, please stay engaged locally, make new connections, do whatever fosters local connection for you. Connecting locally is one of the best antidotes to the feeling of powerlessness and isolation that feed authoritarian movements. Also, if you like what we're doing here, please like us, follow us, rate and review us, do all the things. You can catch us on Substack. On Substack, yes, but also on Blue Sky at the handle Way to Win, where we will continue to release some of our nuggets from our research. And with that, we will see you next Thursday. Until then, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.